Welcome to today's 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Jonah with Bjorklund.
As Jonah is in the belly of the fish and he turns toward God and he has this moment of recognition that those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs, he makes this statement. He says, I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. The ESV says, with a voice of thanksgiving. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. Now, why sacrifice and why this statement of vows? Here he is in the belly of the fish, and he's talking about a sacrifice, and he's talking about vows. What vows? What sacrifice? What's in view here? Well, in the Old Testament, what believers did is they would come to worship and they would bring something to sacrifice, usually an animal. And that sounds barbaric in many ways to our modern ears. But what it was not so much about the sacrifice of the animal. Certainly there was symbolism in it and foreshadowing. But it was also a way of tangibly taking something that cost them dearly and saying, I will give this to God. And so it was a way of value clarification of saying, if I'm really going to follow God, it's not going to cost me nothing. And so Jonah now says, I am going to give a sacrifice. In fact, in the book of Malachi, there's a section at the beginning of the book that talks about bringing less than perfect offerings, less than your best offering, and how it's offensive to God. Because what some people would do is they would say, okay, if I have to bring one of my animals for sacrifice, let me choose the lame one, the one that will bring the least return on the market rather than the best one. And it's as if God's saying, no, bring your best to me. And Jonah here has this tied to repentance. And here's the modern, current, maybe application. And that is, often in our day and age, we think that repentance and turning to God cost us nothing. In Jonah's day, in the Old Testament, people believed that coming and following God cost them. And it was symbolized and demonstrated in this sacrifice and the vows. Now, clearly, there's no New Testament parallel of bringing animals. There's no sense of saying, let me, go into my closet and every time I come to worship, bring a piece of clothing as if to give to God as some kind of offering. Although that might be closer to a modern equivalent. And so it would be like people in Malachi's day were going into their closet and saying, let me find the worst thing so I can give it to God and just check a box, as opposed to saying, God, here, take this best thing of mine for your purpose. Because God didn't need the animals. God wanted the clarification. And so what would clarification look like in your life? What would it look like to say, God, I'm giving you something that shows not you because you know, but shows me, that clarifies for me that you are my priority? Could it be as simple as saying we make a commitment as a family to worship every weekend that we're not sick or out of town? To actually physically be in church and to prioritize an hour and a half, 2 hours of our weekend that feels so precious to us. And maybe this was the idea of take the first day of the week and set it aside to the Lord. Could it be that saying, God, I'm going to give you the first portion of my income, not my leftovers? That is a way of demonstrating the vows and the sacrifice. Could it be that you say, I'm going to give God the first portion of my day and reading and studying? Could it be that you say, I'm going to give God one of my evenings to care for others, to lead a group, to be part of a mission outreach? I don't know what it is, but what I do see in these pages is that for Jonah, the idea of repenting without some kind of a corresponding demonstration seemed completely foreign. And maybe today, For you or for me, we just need to be reminded that turning to God involves saying, God, you can have part of me, the biggest part of me, the best parts of me, and I'm going to demonstrate it by. Maybe today your simple action step is just to assess, do you give God leftovers or do you give God the best? And what would it look like to say, God, I will make a vow or sacrifice to you in my current setting?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.